The sheriff and his deputy search the body and find a triangular-shaped hole in the man's chest, just like the others. Then the deputy notices that there's another hole in the man's leg, right behind the knee. He asks if the others had a similar hole, and the sheriff says no, and speculates that the attacker must have wanted him on the ground. They're interrupted by 3 gunshots, and the sheriff sets off running. What's up everybody, Jeff here, and we're back for another episode of the Malifaux Loreguide, going over the whole story of all your favorite masters. This week, we're talking about Collodi, formerly of the Neverborn, and currently of the Dead Man's Hand. So spoilers coming up for all Collodi's stories, and there'll be a list of those stories in the description, in case you want to check them out for yourself. I also included a reference to the Breachside broadcast episodes that include the stories, in case you'd rather listen to them in long form, rather than read them. Don't forget to like and subscribe, head over to the Discord to hang out and chat with us, and if you really like these videos, then check out the Patreon, where you can see the videos without the ads, and sometimes even get them early, all for just a couple bucks. And you get to support the channel and help keep me going. With that out of the way, let's get into Collodi. Collodi is a puppet, animated by old magics, that spent its time in ancient Malifaux, entertaining the children. When the people disappeared, Collodi found itself alone, and soon it began to feel its first emotion, loneliness. It wandered the land with its puppets, yearning for the time when it brought happiness to children. This wandering eventually brought Collodi to Earth for a brief time, through an errant breach. Eventually, the main breach reopened, and humans settled in Malifaux, and Collodi saw this as an opportunity to continue putting on shows. The humans responded negatively to Collodi, chasing it out of their villages with pitchforks and torches. As a result, Collodi felt its second emotion, anger. Wanting to take revenge on the humans, who denied it its happiness, Collodi decided to take their children away from them, just like they had done to it. Now, Collodi puts on shows in the various towns, and none of the townspeople seem to notice that its marionettes have the faces of children from neighboring towns, all of whom have disappeared. Sheriff Marion Barber heads to the local saloon after receiving word that some rowdy cowboys are back in town. He goes inside to see the group of cowboys playing a game and heads to the bar where he greets the regulars as well as the bartender. After exchanging some pleasantries, he turns to look at the cowboys and notices that they look a little beat up from the brawl that had taken place the week before. He greets the men, and one of them responds, joking in a good nature about how all of his companions are taking his money. The sheriff offers to buy them all a coffee, in hopes that the caffeine will stop them from getting too drunk and too rowdy. The men accept, and the sheriff is satisfied that they won't be causing any trouble, and he goes to leave. As he makes it to the door, it begins pouring rain, and he sees flashes of lightning. At the same time, a large wagon begins rolling into town, though it's not pulled by horses or any other animals, and seems to be controlled by some sort of mechanism. A man gets out of the wagon and approaches the saloon, introducing himself to the sheriff as Confronting Ven, inventor and traveling entrepreneur. The sheriff invites him inside for a cup of coffee. The next day, the sheriff wakes up in his office, somewhat regretting having a few drinks in the saloon the night before. He heads out to get some breakfast, and notices a crowd gathered around Ven's wagon, and the man appears to be trying to sell them something. When he gets closer, he can see that the man is holding several different mechanical toys, and appears to be trying to peddle them to the townspeople. Some of them complain that the toys appear to be too expensive, and Ven insists that they'll never find quality like these anywhere else. They watch as the mechanical toys animate, moving their small parts, and playing music. As Ven continues his sales pitch, he's interrupted when a woman comes out of the saloon and yells, "Blood." The sheriff goes inside, and into one of the guest rooms upstairs, where he finds the 4 cowboys laying in a bed in a pool of blood. He tells the bartender not to let anyone inside, and to send for the town doctor. When the doctor arrives, he examines the bodies, but tells the sheriff that he can pull teeth and sew up cuts, but this is out of his league. They notice something strange, and lift up one of the men's shirts, to find a small triangular-shaped hole in the man's chest. They find the same hole on the other 3 men, and the sheriff speculates that they appear to have been stabbed. The doctor points out that it must be a strange knife to make such a hole, and the sheriff replies that he intends to find out. He asks the doctor to keep this quiet for now, and when the man leaves, the sheriff notices small oval-shaped bloodstains on the floor. He traces them back to the bed, and looks underneath to find a pool of blood staining the floorboards, but in the middle are 4 clean spots. He traces the pattern the other way, and it leads him to a window, where the bloodstains lead up to the windowsill, and the window is open. He looks outside, and sees Ven looking up at him. That evening, when Ven comes inside for a meal, the sheriff asks him some questions about his past. The man is forthcoming, and after the conversation, the sheriff sneaks outside and approaches the wagon. He tries the door and finds it unlocked, and inside, he finds a huge collection of clothing, as well as unsold toys. He goes upstairs to find a workshop and 5 dolls with porcelain faces. As he looks around the books and various belongings, he happens upon what looks like a 3-bladed knife. Suddenly, he's surprised by Ven's voice, asking if he's lost something. The sheriff turns to the man and tells him that he owes him the truth, and explains that the 4 men died under peculiar circumstances, and he also arrived here under peculiar circumstances, so he came to find out if the two things were connected. Ven asks him if he found anything, and the sheriff says no, and asks him if he has anything to tell him. Ven says nothing, other than that he will cooperate with the investigation in any way he can. The sheriff notices the dolls looking at him, even though he seems to remember them looking in a different direction when he first arrived. As the sheriff goes to leave, for a brief second it seems like Ven will block his path, but then the man steps aside and allows him to go. The sheriff meant to stay up all night, watching the wagon, and waiting for Ven to emerge. He must have fallen asleep at some point, because he's awoken by his deputy, who tells him that there's something he needs to see. He picks up a scattergun and follows the deputy to an alleyway, where there's a body laying on the ground. They approach and recognize the doctor, and the sheriff feels sorrow, as the man did not deserve to die like this. They search the body, and find a triangular-shaped hole in the man's chest, just like the others. Then the deputy notices that there's another hole in the man's leg, right behind the knee. He asks if the others had a similar hole, and the sheriff says no, and speculates that the attacker must have wanted him on the ground. They're interrupted by 3 gunshots, and the sheriff sets off running. When he enters one of the guest rooms in the saloon, he sees one of the townspeople standing naked and holding a smoking gun in the air. The man says that it attacked him, and as the sheriff is about to ask, he sees tiny hands clutching to the side of the bed. A small porcelain-faced doll climbs on top of the bed, wielding a strange-looking knife. It approaches them, and the sheriff lets loose with his scattergun, as the pellets tear into the doll and send it flying across the room. The sheriff tells the deputy to keep the townspeople downstairs, and to tell them to arm themselves, as he saw 5 of these dolls in Ven's wagon. As the deputy turns to go, the sheriff adds that if he sees Ven, he should shoot the man. When the deputy leaves, he asks the man what happened, and he explains that he woke up with the doll standing over him, holding the knife. The sheriff tells him that he's lucky he woke up, or the thing might have stuck him, as suddenly the mangled doll begins climbing on top of the bed again. The sheriff uses his scattergun like a bat to swat the doll across the room, and the 2 men hurry to leave, slamming and locking the door, as the doll bumps into it on the other side. The sheriff tells the man to make sure the door doesn't open, as he draws his pistol and leaves. Another one of the townsfolk wakes up and sees a small doll walking across his bedroom, holding a small orb. The man recognizes the depleted soulstone as the doll climbs under his bed, and he hears a clink. He suspects that the doll put the soulstone underneath him, as the small construct climbs on top of the bed. It pulls out a knife, as the old man explains to it that if it thinks he's just gonna lay here while it stabs him with that knife, and suddenly the doll's head explodes as the man finishes his sentence. He recocks his pistol, and as the doll's body squirms around on the floor, he shoots it several more times. The man complains that he'll be the one that has to clean up this mess, and then tells the doll that it was a clever plan to use him to recharge the soulstone. He grabs a bucket and puts it over the squirming body and sits on top, as he tells the doll that he doesn't have an outhouse. After all, who needs one when you have a bucket? The sheriff had gathered all the townspeople in the saloon, where they captured another one of the dolls by pinning it to the floor with a pickaxe. The doll keeps struggling undeterred, and the sheriff is just about to organize a party to go after Ven, when the man himself walks into the saloon. The sheriff draws and fires, and he hears a metallic clink as the bullet hits the man in the chest. Ven tells the sheriff that he seems upset, as the man opens fire again, and he hears another clink as the bullet ricochets. He calls to his deputy, who opens fire with a scattergun, shredding the man's clothes, and revealing a metal plate on his chest. Ven is thrown off balance, but recovers, as 2 dolls walk in the saloon behind him. They both hand him a glowing soulstone, and the man thanks them, as the sheriff tells him that he won't make it out alive. Ven responds by asking what he means by alive, and telling him disappointedly that he has no idea what he's dealing with. He adds that there will be no witnesses, because the sheriff was nice enough to gather all the people in one place. He usually likes to take a town, one person at a time, and it'll often take weeks before anyone suspects him of the murders. But the sheriff had to go digging around in places he didn't belong. The sheriff tells him that he won't be able to take them all, and Ven goes to respond, when suddenly a bucket is slammed over the top of his head. The old man kicks one of the dolls, and then calls out for the others to help him. The sheriff and deputy sees Ven, as some of the other townspeople try to take on the dolls. They find that Ven is much stronger than he looks, and his limbs and body are hard and seem to be made out of metal. The man swings them around as they try to tackle him to the floor, and the sheriff catches a hard elbow in the body. As he falls on the floor, he watches as Ven pulls the bucket off his head and turns to face the old man. As he's about to strike, the old man reaches up and pulls on his chest plate, opening a metallic door and causing soulstones to spill out all over the floor. Ven slumps, and the dolls stop moving as the man collapses onto the floor. After everyone recovers, the sheriff asks the old man how he knew, and the man says that they seem to be here to recharge soulstones. So he figured out that they must all be powered by soulstones, even Ven himself. That night, a wagon that looks just like Ven's rolls out of the town, but this time it has a poster on the side that reads Collodi's Miniature Carnival. A showgirl named Cynthia approaches a carnival at night and takes a look around. She clutches her bag full of soul stones and notices that the attractions at the carnival, while bright and friendly looking during the day, are scary and foreboding at night. She hears a clicking sound and turns around quickly, drawing her Derringer pistol before she realizes it's just her Coryphée. She wishes that Colette would have sent a different Coryphée because this one's face always looks like it's laughing at her. Collodi is in its workshop, carving a face into a wooden block and hearing the music. Collodi's children, the Marionettes, watch as it works. They were the only source of music that it had anymore, and over the centuries it was becoming harder and harder to hear it. Each of them was designed for a different role in its puppet shows, and the shows kept the music flowing. Collodi looks over at a dead girl, the template for this marionette, and then dips its finger in her blood, using it to write on the puppet. The marionettes were made to look like the templates, and even maintain some of their personalities. As Collodi finishes up its work, it hears a noise outside, and the music stops. As Cynthia makes her way through the carnival, she sees a light up ahead. As she gets closer, she realizes that it's a fire, and there are several men surrounding it. She looks around for the Coryphée, but it's gone, so she tries to back away, and accidentally makes some noise. The men approach her, and comment that she's well dressed, and ask her what she's got in her bag. They tell her that they're not going to hurt her, and they just want her valuables, so she should choose to do it the easy way. As one man goes to grab her, she kicks him in the groin, and then elbows another. The leader comments that it looks like she chose the hard way, as Cynthia runs for it. Collodi puts on a disguise, including a mask and an overcoat, and exits its wagon. Several of the marionettes follow, and it sees in the distance a group of humans who are the source of the noise. It notices that several of them have weapons, and it raises its arms as the marionettes begin trembling as Collodi exerts its control over them. Cynthia trips and falls, and her bag cracks open, revealing the glow of the soul stones inside. As the men get closer, she draws her Derringer pistol and turns it on them. The men stop as she collects her bag, but the leader tells her that she's only got 2 shots, so she better make them count. One of the men approaches her, so she fires, and he collapses on the ground, holding onto his wounded knee. The man tells her that she's down to 1, and takes a step forward, and Cynthia hears the sounds of clockwork gears as the Coryphée arrives. It charges at the men gracefully, spinning around in circles like it's dancing ballet, as long blades emerge from hidden compartments in its body. It slashes at the men, as if doing a choreographed dance, and they can do little to stop it. Collodi watches as a new figure arrives, moving gracefully in a swirl of spinning blades. Blood spatters and men scream, and Collodi hears the music. In fact, it's the most beautiful symphony it's felt since the long gone times. One of the last 2 men pulls a gun and points it at Cynthia. She screams, and as the man pulls the trigger, the Coryphée leaps in front of her. It collapses to the ground as Cynthia raises her pistol and shoots the man in the head. The remaining man flees, and Cynthia approaches the Coryphée, thanking it for saving her and telling it that if it had just been there from the start, then it wouldn't need to be repaired. Collodi angrily sends its marionettes after the fleeing man, confident that they'll catch him in the dark. It looks at the woman next to the fallen dancer and makes a decision. It secures its disguise and then approaches her as it tries to think of the correct line for this situation. It asks, "Can I help, milady?" Cynthia grabs one of the blades of the Coryphée as the strange man approaches her and then tells him that she's fine. He responds, telling her that it's her prerogative to lie, but it would be dishonorable for him to leave without lending her assistance. Cynthia notices that his accent seemed to have changed, and his manner of speaking is strange, as it's very flat and slow, and he uses fancy words. She asks if he's one of the carnival actors, and he responds cryptically, causing Cynthia to conclude that he is. She locates a discarded pistol from one of the attackers on the ground, and leaps towards it, turning it on the strange man. He insists that he doesn't mean her any harm, and Cynthia laughs. The man tells her that her dancer is broken, and that surely she has someplace she can go. Cynthia realizes that she's going to be late for her rendezvous, and she asks the man if he can help her hide her dancer for an hour, and she'll pay him 50 scrip. The man agrees, and Cynthia runs off. After bringing the dancer inside the wagon, the marionettes crowd around to watch Collodi do its work. It inspects every aspect of the mechanisms, finding them all fascinating. The music had only ever come while it worked or while entertaining, but never from an outside source like this. Collodi is confident that it can redesign the dancer. After all, it was only made by humans, who did not have centuries of experience. As it continues the examination, it notices that the core mechanism seems to be gone. In its place is a bullet hole. The marionettes that went after the man return, covered in blood, and Collodi gets upset that it'll have to clean them, but pats them on the head for a job well done. Soon there comes a knock at the door, and the music stops. Collodi answers to find the woman, and it is surprised that an hour has passed already. It notices that a man is with her, pushing a wagon, and she asks it for help loading the dancer. Collodi obliges, and then accepts the paper she offers with a bow. Collodi slams its fists on the table as it looks over the dancer. This is the 3rd one it has built, and the music still hasn't returned. Collodi doesn't know what will happen if the music never returns, but it has to figure out a way. It considers that maybe the problem is not the mechanisms, but the template, and realizing that that must be the answer, Collodi considers that it already knows the perfect candidate. After finishing up a show at the Star Theater, Cynthia chats with some of her coworkers in the dressing room. When she goes to leave, she finds a package at the door with her name on it. She opens it to find a puppet inside, dressed the same way she was dressed the night of the carnival, alongside a note from the actor. She finds the puppet cute and decides to take it home with her. The music soars as Collodi finishes work on a new face. It had been strange working with adult female features, but it had gotten through it. The music had changed into something new, a gentle ballad. It puts the head in place and steps back as the music rises and then stops abruptly. Collodi waits until suddenly the dancer begins to move. As Collodi puts the finishing touches on a new marionette, it watches as the puppet examines itself for the first time. Adding a new puppet to its collection used to fill Collodi with joy, but now it feels nothing but loneliness and emptiness. It starts to think about why a construct as sophisticated as itself was created for a task like entertaining children. It considers that its inventor is probably dead, but wonders if there's a journal or some notes that might help explain why it exists. It realizes that such a thing might be hard to find, but the mere thought brings a rare smile to Collodi's wooden face. After killing groups of settlers in the north, Collodi attracts the guild's attention. They send Lucius Matheson, as well as Captain Dashiell, and several of their men. Collodi sends his puppets to stop them, but Dashiell and the subordinates hold them off, as Lucius comes for Collodi. When he finds it, he scolds the puppet, telling it that it broke their agreement to only take children who would not be missed. Collodi replies that the music had suddenly stopped, and Lucius tosses it a music box, and adds that it didn't need to kill whole settlements to bring the music back. The puppet starts pacing, speaking to itself in different voices, and trying to explain its actions to Lucius. The secretary lowers his voice to not be overheard, and tells Collodi that he knows it had been lonely since the first breach closed, but that does not mean it can go around turning all the humans into puppets. He asks it to stop this behavior. Collodi shakes its head, and Lucius tells it that he's left with no choice, and he draws his sword and thrusts. Collodi dodges out of the way as more puppets begin attacking. As they get closer to Lucius, he calls out to Dashiell to cover him, and Collodi uses the opening to attack. It hits Lucius in the face and knocks his mask off, and the secretary looks at Dashiell and calls for help. Dashiell is horrified by the scarred and disfigured face, but he shakes it off and rejoins the battle. Collodi again attacks Lucius and stabs him in the shoulder, but the secretary just snarls and then seizes the soul stones Collodi was using to control the puppets and throws them into the forest. He takes off his gloves, revealing claws on the ends of his fingers, and Collodi tries to back away as he loses control of his minions. Lucius advances towards him as he makes verbal threats, and when he catches the puppet, he begins tearing him apart limb from limb. As he reaches down to tear off Collodi's head, the puppet speaks, "Ashes, ashes, we all fall down." The secretary responds, "Not all of us," and then tears off its head. Back in the city, one of Lucius's servants hands him Collodi's head, newly repaired. He heads to his basement among a collection of different artifacts and places the head on a shelf, telling it that it's not yet time for his next show. Well, that's it for Collodi. Poor Collodi. It barely showed up in the narrative, and then mean old Lucius and Dashiell come and kill it, just because it liked to murder children. A shame, really. I actually think its story had a lot of potential, and I think they could have done something with the angle, where Collodi's mad because it's not allowed to entertain children anymore, so now it kills children instead. I feel like they could have taken that somewhere, but maybe we'll still have a chance to see. I think with every Dead Man's Hand master, Weird was careful to put in some little hints about how we might see them come back. Collodi's head is in Lucius's basement, and he even has that little quip as he puts it on the shelf that sort of implies that we haven't seen the last of the puppeteer. I still think we'll see all the Dead Man's Hand characters come back, but what do you guys think? I know a lot of people are still upset that they're gone, but do you think that the stories are going to head in a direction where we'll see them all come back? Let me know in the comments below. While you're down there, let me know if there's any topics you'd like to see me do a video on in the future. Don't forget to like and subscribe, check out the Discord and the Patreon, and thanks for watching.